Natalie Porter adjusted the delicate silk scarf that covered the left side of her face as she stepped into the grand ballroom of the Ashford Tower. The massive space glittered with crystal chandeliers and the wealth of Seattle's elite society. Each step she took on the polished marble floor echoed her growing discomfort. The thin scar that ran from her temple down to her jaw was hidden beneath the carefully draped fabric. That mark told a story of loyalty that few people in this room would ever understand or appreciate. 18 months ago, she had thrown herself in front of Victor Ashford. When a disgruntled former employee attacked him with a blade during a product launch event, the knife meant for his throat had sliced across her face instead. Whispers in the shadows, such a shame about her face. Victoria Ashford's voice carried across the champagne fountain where Natalie stood. Victor's mother held court with 3 other society women, their designer gowns sparkling under the lights. My son could have married anyone. Someone from our world who understands proper society. Natalie's fingers tightened around her glass. She had heard similar comments before, but they never stopped stinging. These women knew nothing about her contributions to Victor's technology empire. They saw only the surface. The working-class girl from Portland, who had somehow caught the attention of their golden boy. I heard she was just a simple programmer before she trapped him, added Margaret Chen. Wife of a prominent venture capitalist. Probably saw dollar signs in convenience. The irony burned in Natalie's chest. Simple programmer. If only they knew that every major software innovation that had made Ashford Technologies a billion-dollar company had come from her brilliant mind. The artificial intelligence systems that revolutionized customer service. The security protocols that protected millions of users. The cloud infrastructure that outperformed every competitor. The silent observer across the ballroom. Victor stood with a group of investors, his handsome face animated as he discussed quarterly projections and market expansion. His tailored suit fit perfectly on his athletic frame. At 32, he looked every inch the successful tech entrepreneur that magazines loved to feature on their covers. Natalie watched him laugh at something Senator Morrison said. He glanced her direction briefly, their eyes meeting for just a moment before he turned back to his conversation. That small acknowledgement felt hollow compared to the man who had once promised to stand beside her through anything. Mrs. Ashford. The voice belonged to Catherine Wells, a journalist known for her sharp interviews and sharper pen. I've been wanting to ask you about the new AI project your husband just announced. Natalie's expression remained neutral, even as frustration bubbled beneath the surface. I'm sure Victor would be happy to discuss it with you. But surely you have some insight, Catherine pressed. After all, you work in technology too, don't you? Work in technology. As if she was a casual hobbyist, rather than the chief architect behind every system that made Ashford Technologies relevant. Natalie had learned to navigate these conversations carefully, deflecting attention away from her own achievements to avoid threatening Victor's image as the visionary founder. The breaking point ladies, Victoria Ashford swept over with the grace of someone accustomed to commanding attention. I hope you're enjoying the gala. Everything looks absolutely perfect tonight. Your event planning is always impeccable, Margaret agreed. Victoria's smile was ice-wrapped in elegance. Well, when one has standards to maintain, one simply cannot compromise. Some things are worth the extra effort to get right. Her eyes flickered meaningfully toward Natalie. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Some things, some people, were not worth the effort. Were mistakes that needed to be corrected. Natalie excused herself with practiced politeness and made her way toward the balcony that overlooked the Seattle skyline. The cool night air felt refreshing against her flushed cheeks. She removed the scarf, letting the breeze touch the scar that marked her sacrifice. Beautiful view. The comment came from Derek Hughes, Victor's former business partner, who now ran a competing firm. Though I imagine the view from inside is rather less pleasant for you tonight. Natalie turned to study him. Derek had always been perceptive, one of the few people who seemed to recognize her actual value. What makes you say that? Because I've been watching how they treat you, he said bluntly, and I've been watching how Victor lets them. The confrontation. Natalie found Victor near the bar an hour later. His tie was loosened, his fourth glass of scotch in hand. The investors had finally released him from their endless discussions of market share and profit margins. "We need to talk," she said quietly. Victor's smile was distracted. "Can it wait? Senator Morrison wants to discuss the government contract, and I need to be sharp for that conversation." "Your mother and her friends spent the evening mocking me," Natalie said, "calling me unsuitable, suggesting I trapped you into marriage. And you stood there the entire night without saying a single word in my defense." Victor's expression shifted to annoyance. "Natalie, they're just gossiping. You know how these society events are. Nobody takes that talk seriously. I take it seriously." Her voice remained calm, but something dangerous flickered in her dark eyes. "I take it seriously when people mock the scar I got saving your life." "You're being overly sensitive," Victor said, the Scotch making his words slightly slurred. "My mother adores you. You're imagining things." The words landed like physical blows. Overly sensitive. Imagining things. The same dismissive phrases he had been using more frequently over the past year, whenever she tried to discuss how his family and social circle treated her. "The truth. Merges, tell me something." "Victor," Natalie said softly, "what's the encryption protocol we use for client data storage?" Victor blinked. "What does that have to do with anything? Just answer the question. You're the founder and CEO of a technology company. Surely you know your own security systems." Silence stretched between them as Victor's face went blank. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "I have people who handle those technical details. What about the AI learning algorithm that won us the Department of Defense contract last year?" "Natalie, I don't have time for a quiz about operational specifics." "Because you don't know," she said. Each word fell with devastating clarity. "You don't know because you've never known. I designed every system, wrote every major code base, solved every technical crisis. And you've been taking credit for my work while letting your family treat me like an embarrassment." Victor's face flushed with anger and something that looked like shame. "That's not fair. I never asked you to sacrifice your career ambitions. You chose to work behind the scenes. I chose to build something with you," Natalie corrected. "I chose to be your partner. But partnerships require mutual respect and public support, things you seem incapable of providing." "Maybe my mother is right," Victor said, his anger finally breaking through. The alcohol had loosened his carefully controlled public persona. "Maybe we have grown apart. Maybe I do need someone who fits into this world without constantly causing friction and creating problems." The words hung in the air between them, irreversible and devastating. Natalie nodded slowly. "Then let me make this simple for you, Victor. By tomorrow morning, you'll have exactly what you want. A life free from the complications I apparently cause." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble with the finality of a closing door. Behind her, Victor stood frozen, not yet understanding that he had just destroyed the only person who truly knew how to keep his empire from collapsing. As Natalie disappeared into the crowd, she had already begun calculating her next moves with the same strategic precision that had built Ashford Technologies into a powerhouse. Victor Ashford was about to learn a very expensive lesson about value, sacrifice, and the true cost of taking someone for granted. Victor Ashford woke to sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse bedroom. His head throbbed from too much scotch, and the events of the previous night felt hazy and dreamlike. He reached across the bed, expecting to find Natalie, but encountered only cold sheets. The apartment felt different. Too quiet. Too empty. He found the note on the kitchen counter, propped against the coffee maker that Natalie had programmed every morning for the past 3 years. The handwriting was her precise, elegant script. "Victor, I've taken only what belongs to me. The rest is yours to manage as you see fit. All my personal files and research have been removed from the company's servers. I wish you well, Natalie." Ed read the note 3 times before the implications fully registered. He grabbed his phone and pulled up the company's server access. His hands trembled as he navigated through folders that suddenly looked unfamiliar and incomplete. The AI development files showed gaps where detailed documentation should have been. The security protocols contained base-level code, but none of the sophisticated modifications that had made their systems unhackable. The client management algorithms were present, but the learning models that made them adaptive were simply gone. The first cracks Monday morning arrived with the force of a freight train. Victor sat in his corner office at Ashford Technologies, staring at his computer screen with growing panic. His assistant Jennifer had already buzzed 3 times about urgent matters requiring his immediate attention. "The Department of Defense is online too," Jennifer's voice came through the intercom. "They're calling about the quarterly security review." Victor picked up the phone with false confidence. "General Patterson, good to hear from you. Ashford, we need to discuss the anomaly reports from last week's system audit." The general's voice was all business. "Your team was supposed to send detailed analysis by Friday. We're now 3 days overdue, and our cybersecurity director is getting nervous." "Of course. I'll have someone look into that immediately," Victor said smoothly, making notes he didn't fully understand. "We need Natalie on this," General Patterson said bluntly. "She's the only one who truly understands the architecture of these systems. Can you have her call me directly?" Victor's stomach dropped. "Natalie is no longer with the company. Personal leave." The silence on the other end was deafening. "Ashford, she designed every security layer we're using. If she's not available, we need to seriously reconsider this contract. We're talking about national security infrastructure here." After the call ended, Victor sat motionless. The general's words echoed in his mind. She designed every security layer. How had he never fully grasped the extent of Natalie's involvement? Unraveling threads by Wednesday, the situation had deteriorated rapidly. Victor called an emergency meeting with his senior development team. 5 engineers sat around the conference table, looking uncomfortable and avoiding direct eye contact. "All right. I need status updates on all active projects," Victor began, trying to project the authority he usually wore so easily. Thomas Park, the lead developer, cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, we've hit some significant roadblocks. The banking client implementation that was scheduled for next month, we're missing critical components of the integration framework." "What do you mean missing?" Victor demanded. "The documentation exists, but the actual proprietary algorithms that make the system work were apparently custom-built by Natalie. Without her source code and implementation notes, we're essentially starting from scratch."
Rachel Kim,
the project manager added quietly. "It's not just that project, Mr. Ashford. The predictive analytics system for the healthcare clients, the real-time processing engine for the financial sector, the machine learning models for customer behavior analysis. Natalie was the primary architect on all of them." Victor felt the room spinning slightly. "You're telling me that none of you can continue her work?" "We can eventually rebuild," Thomas said carefully, "but it will take months, maybe years, to replicate what she created. And honestly, some of her innovations were beyond what any of us fully comprehend. She was operating on a different level entirely." The conspiracy revealed Thursday brought a visitor Victor hadn't expected. Derek Hughes appeared at his office without an appointment, walking past Jennifer's protests with the confidence of someone who knew he would be seen. "We need to talk," Derek said, closing the office door behind him. "I'm busy dealing with a crisis," Victor snapped. "Yes, the crisis of losing the only person who made this company worth anything," Derek replied, settling into a chair uninvited. "I'm here to tell you something you need to hear, even though you probably won't want to listen." Victor glared but remained silent. Derek pulled out a folder and tossed it onto the desk. 6 months ago, your mother approached me with a proposition. She wanted to know if I would be interested in hiring Natalie away from Ashford Technologies. Offered to facilitate the introduction to create circumstances that would make Natalie want to leave." "What are you talking about?" Victor's voice was dangerously quiet. "Your mother has been orchestrating a campaign to drive Natalie out of your life," Derek said bluntly. "The social mockery at events, the constant undermining, the whispers about her being unsuitable. It was all calculated to make Natalie feel unwelcome and unappreciated." Victor opened the folder. Inside were emails, text messages, documented conversations. His mother's elegant handwriting on notes planning social events specifically designed to exclude or embarrass Natalie. Messages to society friends encouraging them to question Natalie's background and motives. "Why are you showing me this?" Victor asked, his voice hollow. "'Cause I turned down your mother's offer," Derek said. "I told her that Natalie Porter was worth 10 of you, that trying to steal her away would be both unethical and ultimately unsuccessful. She's loyal to a fault, even when that loyalty isn't deserved or reciprocated." Derek stood to leave. "I'm showing you this because you're about to lose everything, Victor. Not just Natalie, but this entire company. And you need to understand that it's not bad luck or market forces. It's the direct consequence of your own blindness and cowardice." The revelation that evening, Victor sat alone in his office long after everyone else had gone home. He accessed the company's financial records, something he rarely did personally since Natalie had always handled the detailed analysis. The numbers told a story he had never wanted to see. Every major contract, every significant client relationship, every innovative breakthrough could be traced directly back to Natalie's involvement. Her name appeared in the background of every success story, carefully hidden behind his own. He found performance reviews she had written for team members, recommendations that had led to successful hires, crisis management plans that had prevented disasters he never even knew threatened them, emails to vendors negotiating better terms, communications with regulatory agencies handling compliance issues, technical documentation that revealed the depth of her expertise. Victor pulled up security footage from the night of the attack that had scarred Natalie. He had never watched it before, the memory too painful. Now he forced himself to see. The video showed them leaving the product launch event together. The former employee, Gerald Morrison, peering from the shadows with hatred burning in his eyes and a knife gleaming in his hand. Victor frozen in shock. Natalie moving with incredible speed, putting herself between them without hesitation, the blade that should have sliced. Victor's throat instead caught Natalie's face. She went down hard, blood pouring from the wound. And Victor, instead of immediately going to her, had stumbled backward in shock while security tackled Morrison. It was Natalie who had maintained his consciousness long enough to give a statement to police. Natalie, who had refused to press charges because she knew the publicity would damage the company during a sensitive merger negotiation. Natalie, who had worn scarves and makeup to hide the scar at public events because she didn't want to make Victor uncomfortable. With questions about what happened, the price of arrogance. Friday morning brought the final blow. Victor arrived at the office to find Jennifer looking pale and frightened. "Sir, we've had a major security breach," she said. "Someone accessed our client database overnight and downloaded confidential information from at least 40 accounts." Victor felt his blood run cold. How is that possible? "We have multiple layers of security. Apparently those layers were only fully functional when Natalie was actively monitoring them," Thomas explained when Victor called him in urgently. "She had created manual oversight protocols that caught intrusion attempts our automated systems missed. Without her daily reviews, someone found a vulnerability. Can we fix it?" "Eventually, but clients are already calling. They want assurances that their data is secure. They want to speak with our chief security architect." Now, Thomas paused meaningfully. "They want Natalie." Victor spent the rest of the day on damage control calls, trying to reassure clients while having no real technical knowledge to offer. By evening, 3 major contracts had been suspended pending security audits. 2 clients had terminated their agreements entirely. The board of directors called an emergency meeting for Monday morning. Victor knew what that meant. They would demand answers he couldn't provide and solutions he didn't know how to implement. The truth in numbers. Saturday. Victor sat in the empty penthouse, surrounded by files and documents. He had spent hours going through everything, forcing himself to see the complete picture he had willfully ignored for years. Natalie had built Ashford Technologies, not alongside him, not supporting his vision, but actually creating the substance behind the brand. Every algorithm, every security protocol, every innovative system that made them competitive bore her fingerprints. And he had let his mother and her society friends mock her sacrifice. He had dismissed her concerns as oversensitivity. He had suggested she was the problem, the source of friction, but she was actually the only thing holding his empire together. His phone buzzed with a message from his mother. "Darling, I heard about your difficulties at work. Perhaps this is for the best. You can start fresh now, without complications. Call me. Victor stared at the message, finally understanding the full scope of her manipulation. She had engineered Natalie's isolation and humiliation, pushing until the inevitable break occurred. And he had been too blind, too comfortable, too arrogant to see it happening. The company he thought he had built was crumbling. The woman he had promised to cherish was gone. And Victor Ashford was left alone with the devastating realization that he had destroyed the best thing in his life through his own weakness and pride. Monday morning arrived with the weight of Judgment Day. Victor sat at the head of the conference table, facing 8 board members whose expressions ranged from concern to openly hostile. The quarterly financial reports projected on the screen behind him told a devastating story of rapid decline. In 1 week, we've lost 6 major contracts worth approximately $40 million, Chairman Robert Sterling said, his voice cold and precise. Our stock prices dropped 17%. 3 key engineers have resigned. And we're facing potential lawsuits from clients whose data was compromised in the security breach. Victor forced himself to maintain eye contact, though shame burned in his chest. We're implementing new security measures and working to rebuild client confidence. With what expertise? Demanded board member Linda Morrison. Every technical specialist we've consulted says the systems are too complex to understand. Without extensive documentation that apparently doesn't exist or has been removed, Natalie Porter was the architect of our entire technical infrastructure, Robert continued. And according to multiple sources, she's no longer with the company. Would you care to explain why our most valuable asset walked away without any succession planning or knowledge transfer? The question hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Victor had spent the weekend rehearsing answers, but none of them felt adequate when faced with the hard reality of board scrutiny. Personal circumstances led to her departure, Victor said carefully. I'm working on bringing her back to facilitate a proper transition. You're working on it? Linda's eyebrows rose. Victor, this company is hemorrhaging value by the hour. We need concrete solutions, not hopeful intentions. Robert leaned forward. The board is giving you 2 weeks to stabilize this situation. Either bring Natalie Porter back in a significant capacity or find equivalent expertise to replace her. Fail to do either, and we'll be forced to consider leadership changes. The search begins. Victor left the board meeting, understanding that his entire future hung by a thread. He had 2 weeks to fix what he had spent years. Breaking through negligence and arrogance, his first call went to Natalie's phone. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Her recorded voice, professional and distant, felt like a knife to his heart. Natalie, it's me. Please call back. We need to talk about everything. I know I made terrible mistakes, but the company needs you. I need you, please. The message felt hollow even as he spoke it. He tried 3 more times throughout the day, each call going unanswered. By Tuesday, Victor had hired a private investigator to locate Natalie. The report came back within hours. She had moved out of their shared penthouse and into a modest apartment in a different neighborhood. She had also registered a new business entity called Porter Solutions, with herself as the sole proprietor. Victor drove to the address Wednesday afternoon, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The building was nice but unremarkable, a far cry from the luxury they had shared. The thought of Natalie downsizing her life because of him made his stomach twist with guilt. He knocked on apartment 412 and waited. Footsteps approached, then stopped. He could sense her presence on the other side of the door, deciding whether to acknowledge him. Natalie, please. I just want to talk. The door opened slowly. Natalie stood there wearing simple jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. Without makeup or formal clothes, she looked younger and somehow more herself than she had in years. The scar on her face was fully visible, no longer hidden behind scarves or careful positioning. She looked beautiful.
Nice.
What do you want, Victor? Her voice was calm but guarded. To apologize. To explain. To ask for your help. The words tumbled out. The company is falling apart. The board is threatening to remove me. Clients are leaving. Everything you built is crumbling and I don't know how to fix it. Natalie's expression didn't change. That sounds like a business problem, not a personal one. It's both, Victor said desperately. I was wrong about everything. About you, about us, about what you contributed. I've spent the past week going through files and records and finally seeing the truth. You built Ashford Technologies. Not me. You. I'm glad you finally noticed, Natalie said without warmth. But recognition after the fact doesn't change what happened. You let your family humiliate me? You dismissed my concerns. You suggested I was the problem when I was actually the solution to every challenge you faced. The full truth, there's more you need to know, Victor said quietly. About my mother and what she did? He pulled out the folder Derek had given him. The evidence of Victoria Ashford's calculated campaign to drive Natalie away. Natalie took it silently, flipping through the pages with an expression that gradually shifted from neutral to something harder and angrier. She planned this, Natalie said finally. Every social slight, every cruel comment, every moment of public humiliation. It was orchestrated. I should have protected you, Victor said, his voice breaking slightly. I should have seen what was happening and stopped it. Instead, I made excuses and told you to ignore it. I failed you in every way that mattered. Natalie set the folder down on a small table near the door. Yes, you did. But your mother's manipulation doesn't excuse your own choices, Victor. She created circumstances, but you decided how to respond to them. You chose to prioritize your comfort over my dignity. You chose to let me take the blame for friction that wasn't my fault. I know. Victor felt tears threatening but forced them back. I was a coward. I took the easy path, and it cost me everything that actually mattered. You deserved a partner who stood beside you publicly, who acknowledged your contributions, who defended your honor. Instead, the new beginnings 6 months later, Ashford Technologies had not only stabilized but thrived under the new structure. With Natalie's expertise properly acknowledged and her authority clearly established, clients returned and new contracts flooded in. The company's stock had recovered and exceeded its previous peak. Victor and Natalie had dinner together twice a week, slowly rebuilding the connection that had been damaged by years of taking each other for granted. They talked about everything now, from business strategy to personal feelings, with the kind of honest communication that should have existed from the beginning. One evening, as they walked through the city after dinner, Victor stopped and turned to face Natalie. I know we're taking this slowly, and I respect that completely, he said. But I want you to know something. Losing you was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Not because of the company or the business consequences, but because I finally understood what you meant to me. Your intelligence, your courage, your unwavering integrity. You're the best person I've ever known, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving I deserve a second chance. Natalie touched the scar on her face, the mark that had once been a source of shame, but now felt like a badge of honor. We both made mistakes, Victor. I sacrificed too much of myself and didn't speak up when I should have demanded respect. We're learning together how to be true partners, equal partners, Victor corrected gently. Natalie agreed, smiling as she took his hand. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but they were walking it together now, with open eyes and honest hearts. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about perfect people finding each other, but about flawed people choosing to grow and transform through the hard lessons life provides. And sometimes, the truth that changes everything is simply recognizing the value that was there all along, waiting to be acknowledged and celebrated.